Alright, what's going on, guys? So, the anniversary, the 10-year anniversary for Stellaris has come and gone, or it just happened. And I wanted to kind of make this video to kind of talk about the game and kind of the state of the game and the support it's received over the years. This isn't going to be a review of the game. There are other places you can go for that. There are whole channels revolved around talking about the game and the different features. And honestly, there's too much to talk about for me to feel comfortable making a video about it, because there's a lot of stuff in this game that I've never actually played through, despite having a lot of time in the game. You know, I do have almost 2,000 hours in the game, but it is a Paradox game, so that doesn't mean that I've seen everything. I've seen a lot. I know a lot about the game. I played the game for a long time, but so I do have my own opinions on the game, and more specifically what we're going to talk about in this video, and that I wanted to touch on, given that it is the 10-year anniversary, the support that the game has gotten, and kind of the wider perspective of it, and kind of talk about the state of the game as it is now, because despite the fact that it is like a highly recommended game from most people, like, I mean, I would recommend it for people who like Space 4X, but most people who like Space 4X have probably already played it. Not to say that it's the only good Space 4X out there. I mean, there's other games like Galciv, and, well, Galciv's having new expansions, too, so that's updating. Of a Solar Empire, Distant Worlds Universe 2. Well, the first one I like kind of better, but the second one is also out. So there's other games out there. There's other Space 4Xs that are recommended, or that are good for different reasons, but certainly not the first one, and it's not like there's no competition in the space. But despite the fact that it is recommended by most people who are into Space 4X games, to people who want to get into Space 4X games, if you go look on the store page, it's sitting at least as of recently, the most recent reviews, is in like the last year and a half, are sitting at a mixed rating, with at 63%. Now, it's not nearly as bad as like Civ 5, or not Civ 5, it's not nearly as bad as Civ 7, where it's like 50%, and there's only 5,000 people playing the game less than a year after launch, and they're desperately like backtracking on their core features to try to get back some of the people they lost because they realized that they fucked up. It's not that bad. If you check the Steam charts, at least, there's anywhere from like 12,000 to 20,000 people playing at any given time, given obviously time of day and, you know, things like that. And that's 10 years after launch. So it's definitely in a way better state than something like Civ 7 is, as per my last video. It is still sitting at a mixed rating as of the recent reviews. Oh, it's 68%. I thought it was 63. It's 63% as of like a week ago. So it is rising. So I kind of wanted to go in and kind of, you know, talk about the state of the game and why that is the case, and, you know, go over the whole DLC and support strategy that they've gone with in general. I do generally support what they've done with the game. I think it can be off-putting to some, and we'll get into that, but I think you don't get to be as expansive as Stellaris is as a game without having as much support as it's had. And what I mean by that is you can do things in Stellaris you can't do in any other Space 4X, and I think that's because of the massive amount of support. Because you can do things like niche that you wouldn't even think of, like become like a giant fucking space dragon or whatever. That's fucking an out there idea, but you can do it. Like, it's just the amount of things that you can do with your people, and it's wild. Like, the game is wildly, I wouldn't say wildly complex, but it's like wildly wide in the amount of things that you can do and the amount of content that there is. Own all the DLCs and stuff, which, again, we'll get into that. But again, if you do, it's one of the most expansive Space 4Xs in terms of just living out, I don't want to say living out fantasy because it's science fiction, but kind of living out your science fiction fantasy, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't. You can kind of turn your aliens or your species into whatever you want them to be. You can make them robots. You can have them be, you know, like fucking Skynet Terminators. Just any sci-fi trope you can think of, you can pull off. And more. And ones that you can't even think of. There's like a Resurrector people that I've never even messed with the Reanimator people. There's Thermophile people, which that's the only expansion I don't own as of yet. So I don't know anything about those. There's Cosmogenesis stuff, the Nemesis stuff. I've never messed with any of that stuff because I generally tend to play Benevolent Empires. I know, I'm a little bitch. So, despite everything else I'm going to say, I do generally support the job that they've done with the game and cultivating the community around the game, and the mod support has also been great. I always have to give props for great mod support to keep the game alive. I mean, they've done a great job, I think, supporting the game overall. Despite all the complaining I'm probably going to do from this point on. Despite the good that it has done the game and the community over the years, the way they've supported it, I think it's also been kind of a double-edged sword. And what do I mean by that? Well, the wider public, as in, like, the people who aren't already into, like, Paradox games, they have a definite, like, aversion to Paradox because of their DLC strategy. You can see it all over online. It's everywhere. People are like, man, they're going to turn into Paradox and milk it. They would say they're milking Stellaris because in all their other games because they released DLC for it. I would argue against that point because I don't think that just providing content for a game is necessarily milking the game. I think that's kind of a stupid mindset to have. Milking the game, I think, would be more like not releasing any content and like trying to get people to buy useless stuff. So I don't think they're milking the game. I don't think they're milking any of their games. But that is definitely the idea that most people have about Paradox from the outside looking in. And I think it makes people less likely to get into Paradox games, which, you know, like I said, the game is in a fine state. It's got, you know, a lot of people, between 12 and 20,000 people playing at any point 10 years after launch. It's not enough people are still playing it that they're still supporting the game. You know, they got more DLCs coming. So it's not like they need a massive new influx of players. I do think it kind of sucks that you can't recommend people Paradox games like Stellaris or say that you're into Stellaris. So people are like, oh, you're into that DLC crap? Why do you like supporting that company that's just like it? And again, it's like this idea that Paradox is this shitty company that's taking advantage of their customer base because they're releasing content for their games over a long span of time. Again, I know that that's not the case, or at least that's my opinion that that's not the case, and a lot of other fans of the game's opinion that that's not the case, but that is the outside perspective that people have, and it makes people less likely to get into the game. And honestly, dude, I'm going to be honest, guys, and I've been positive so far this video, but when you look at the store page and you look at all the DLCs and you look at they're asking for subscriptions and all this other shit, it's hard to blame them. It's easy for someone like me, who's been literally with the game since the very beginning, since actually before it launched, and was like reading the dev diaries and stuff up to launch, and has been playing it and like buying the DLCs mostly as they came out, sometimes on sale over the years. It's easy for me to not see the big deal and be like, well, just buy the DLC or just try the subscription out or whatever. But it's like, dude, it's so much money, even if, and I get that the DLCs are on sale all the time. Like, I get that. But even when they're on sale, like, if they're on sale for half off, a lot of these DLCs are like $40. Okay, not $40, $25. I'll don't comment that. I corrected myself. $25. But still, you look at all of this stuff, and when it's not on sale, that's still almost $400. So, I mean, even if it's on sale for half off and you can get all that stuff for half off, that's still, what, almost $200? That's a lot of money. So, like, and then they're asking for a subscription, and it's like, dude, what is it? Are we back to, like, MMO days, like World of Warcraft or some shit? Like, and again, I know it's only $10 a month, and you can just try it out and whatever, but still, like, a subscription, like, people already have a bunch of subscriptions. I know for me personally, if I was just getting into the game now, and I definitely wouldn't want to fucking do a subscription, because it's like, dude, I already got Spotify and Amazon and a rotating section of fucking Disney Plus, HBO, and Netflix. Like, I don't need another subscription service to add on to that shit. Like, that shit sucks. So, like, I'm subscribed to enough shit already that already fucking adds up and fucks me in the ass. Like, I don't need another subscription. You know, you look at that stuff and it's easy to see why people get the idea of like, oh, they're milking their customer base. People pay all this money. It's like, I mean, kind of, yeah, like $375 at once. Yeah, that's a lot of money, but $375 over the course of 10 years, I don't know how many that would be a year. Someone can do the math, but suddenly that's much more manageable. You know, that's actually a subscription that you can keep, if you want to call it that, you can keep up with. If it's like 30, $40 a year it comes out to. So, for a game that I've gotten, you know, almost 2,000 hours of entertainment out of, I would think it's worth it. But if you're coming at it today from a new person's perspective, or someone who's just trying to get into the game, yeah, it's a lot. It's hard to blame people when they look at all that shit and they're just like, yeah, no, I don't want to deal with all that. I'll just play something else. There's also we're gonna get in another big problem, and it's a genuine problem too. And this is more for the people who are actually play the game periodically. More people like me who kind of will play the game for like a couple weeks obsessively, drop it for a few months, come back for a couple weeks, drop it for a few months, come back, so on and so forth. They continuously like overhaul major parts of the game to the point where you have to kind of relearn how to play. And that can be a major turnoff as well for some people. I know a person who I used to play with who doesn't want to really come back because he's like, I don't want to have to relearn all that shit. Because since he played, they completely redid the way that planets work and districts work and all that, and buildings work and all that shit, and he just doesn't want to have to relearn it. So it's like, it is an issue because a lot of people don't want to have to relearn that shit. Why, like, it sucks if I have to learn the game once. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the most complex game of all time. It's definitely probably of the Paradox, like, 4X games or Grand Strategy games. It's definitely probably the easiest to learn, I would say. Probably way easier than something like Crusader Kings or Europa Universalis. But I will say, though, even though it isn't as complex as those games, and it is probably the easiest to learn out of like all of the Paradox 4X games, there are times where it doesn't really do a good enough job at explaining things to the player. And I'm going to give you a good example of something that happened to me while I was getting footage for this video. I don't know if I got it on camera, but so I had a volatile mote shortage, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why, because for some reason the game doesn't tell you what's taking up your hostile mote storage. And you can see where your power is getting used and where your minerals are getting used and that stuff. It'll say this much from ships, this much from buildings, whatever, but it won't for your volatile motes. At least not that I can see. And I have like I said, I have a lot of time in the game, so I should know if there's a menu where you can see where the fuck that shit's coming out from. You know, maybe that's the case, but and the thing is, normally you could say, well, just buy some moat buildings or, you know, build some mining stations that get moats. Well, the thing is, I hadn't researched that technology yet. I don't know how I managed to somehow use moats when I don't even have the research to do so, but apparently somehow I was. And it was -0 a month, by the way. It wasn't -1 or 2 or 3. It was -0, yet for some reason it was still causing a shortage. So you could explain that one to me. I couldn't build my way out of it either. Luckily, again, because I don't tend to play genocidal empires or asshole empires, I was able to find an empire that was willing to trade 1 mote a month for like some alloys or some shit, and I was able to actually buy my way out of it. But like, shit like that can happen. And like, if I didn't know enough about the game and know that you can go into other empires and trade the old-fashioned way with like trade deals, I would have been fucked. Because the game didn't want to tell me where that moat was coming from. If it was even happening at all, I'm convinced it might have been a bug. Like I said, it was -0 a month, which makes no sense. And I do play with a heavily modded game, you could probably tell, so that might have something to do with it. But like, still, the game should tell you where that shit is coming from, like it does with energy and minerals. But just stuff like that make it so like it's not as easy for new players to get into as you might initially think. Still, you know, there is a learning curve to it. And it sucks to have to kind of relearn that shit every time and relearn the optimum way to build and all that shit. It really doesn't help when they break the game a lot of the time and introduce a whole bunch of bugs with a lot of these updates. And they are getting better with that, with the custodian stuff, I know. But it was still bugged, just like every other Paradox game, it seems. And I wish they would learn from it. There's always one patch that fucks everything up, and I think is the main reason why the Steam page recent reviews are mixed. I think it was 4.0 completely borked shit. It was an update where I think it was 4.0. It was last year, so maybe you can correct me on that in the comments. Last year they had an update, or around January actually, and you can see it in the Steam reviews. There was a patch that it was supposed to be to minimize late game lag. That was the whole point. It's like the game's slowing down too much. People that aren't on supercomputers can't even run the fucking game. You did a game to reduce lag, and now it's laggier than ever, and it's buggier. And it sucks. It's like this with every fucking Stellaris game, or not every Stellaris game, every Paradox game. Again, comment down below. I don't know as much about the other games, but I know that there was other patches for like the other games where there was always like one patch that the entire like user base hated, that like fucked shit up and bugged things and made things not work right. And it's like, dude, why do you keep repeating the same shit? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. It's like that with Paradox, because it's like with every single game, they have one patch that they don't test properly, and they're just like, send it out, we need to release, fucking make our quarter, send it out. And they send it out, and then they get a shit ton of fucking flack for it on Steam and in reviews and stuff. And then like, shit, now we gotta fix it. And it's like, dude, you could have avoided this whole thing if you just waited and fixed the shit before you released it to begin with. And it's frustrating. And another thing that's frustrating, and this is the last thing that kind of frustrates me, is they do seem to be kind of receptive to their player base and what the player base wants, kind of implementing things that a lot of the people are asking for. But like, people have been asking for internal politics for years. That's the one thing, and every time there's a new DLC asked for, people... I've seen the videos. Like, if you look at the videos where people like are covering like the announcements for the DLC, like all the Stellaris people, like internal politics, where everyone's been dying for years. We've been asking for this, and they still are refusing to put it in, and I don't understand why. Like, it's the one, it's a layup. It's literally the easiest bit of goodwill and bit of money that you could make, man. People are desperate for internal politics. They want the internal politics to mean shit. They want you to actually have to fucking care about the internal factions and actually pay attention to them instead of just completely forgetting they exist. Like, it sucks right now. And I know it's not quite like that. Like, they add Unity, and I know Unity is really strong right now. Like, I get it. But, like, there's still no, like, political infighting. You can't, like, start a civil war or, like, try to cause, like, internal conflicts in other empires via, like, espionage, which would be really cool. You can have, like, uprisings, but they're really hard to have happen because you gotta really fuck up to make your people unhappy enough for that to happen. And even when they do usually happen, they're usually stamped out immediately. Like, there needs to be a better internal politics system to actually make you pay attention to what your people want and actually try to do things give you other goals other than just ascension stuff and warring with other people. I would also argue for the case of more galactic crises that aren't combat focused. I know they have references to like a plague that wiped out one of the precursors. Like, maybe you could have a mechanic like that. I know people are kind of touchy because of the COVID thing, but still be a cool crisis to contend with that doesn't rely on combat power, because kind of a lot of the endgame crises right now are all just fleet focused. But, you know, maybe just, like I said, just some more stuff that's non-combat focused, that's like a crisis that you have to kind of put up with. I like the galactic community and people kind of taking over and kind of consolidating power via the galactic community. Could kind of be considered an endgame crisis if you want to look at it that way. Anyway, I guess I've rambled long enough. I just wanted to get this video out and kind of talk about the game because it's been so long, and you know, this channel is kind of an outlet for me to talk about games that I've been playing and games that I care about. So figured since it was the 10-year anniversary, it kind of gives me another excuse to talk about it and play it a little bit. But you know, let me know in the comments what you think if I'm wrong. You know, if maybe I'm too soft on Paradox. Maybe I should be chastising them for milking their fan base, or maybe maybe I'm too hard on them. Maybe it's like, man, they're listening to their fan base and they're still supporting the game. Give them some slack. Just because they're not making what you and what other people want, like they're still supporting the game. You're being too hard on them. Just let me know in the comments. Whatever you think. Like, dislike the video. Whatever you want to do. Until next time, this is Unfiltered Ascent signing out. Thanks for watching, guys.
Initiating communications. Initiating communications. COG discovered. Spaceborne life form encountered. discovered. Engaging enemy fleet. spaceborne life form encountered. Construction complete. Establishing colony. Technology discovered. Spaceborne life form encountered. Initiating communications. Construction complete. Technology discovered. Spaceborne life form encountered. Complete.